Great. Good morning, everyone. Today we'll be presenting our project to you, which is quantifying jump phases of lower limb mechanical muscle function in athletes. So my name is Meredith.
My name is Anthony. And I'm Joseph.
Just to give you a really brief overview of what we'll be talking about today, we'll start off with our introduction, tell you a little bit about some previous work, go over our problem statement and objective, then go over our methods, results, and then discuss it and kind of wrap things up after that. So an introduction to muscle asymmetry. Athletes of different sports often have substantial difference in their muscle function, and many sports force athletes to favor a dominant side of their body, which will lead to this muscle asymmetry that we're talking about. So as you can see in this photo here with the tennis player, her one arm is much larger than the other, just as a result of her using her dominant side of her body. Additionally, muscle asymmetry might be seen in athletes with previous injuries or athletes that are currently undergoing rehabilitation of these injuries. So an example of that is anterior cruciate ligament injuries or ACL injuries. As you can see from the photo there, one gentleman has one leg that is much stronger than the other as a result of like an ACL injury. The previous work that kind of sparked this study is from Jordan in 2015. So this study involved looking at alpine ski racers with ACL injuries, and it had them perform two different jumps on force plates. So using instantaneous force data, the variables in each jump phases were numerically found. So they looked at peak force, peak impulse, peak power, the asymmetry index, and they came up with the conclusion that skiers who had those previous ACL injuries had greater muscle asymmetry and kinetic impulse asymmetry. So now back to our study. Our problem statement is essentially that it's really difficult to measure muscle performance, but we can have subjects perform jumps on force plates that can quantify the muscle performance and any asymmetry that is found. However, this requires really big data sets. So as you can see from the raw force data that we get from those force plates, it's very burdensome and time consuming. Just being provided this raw data doesn't really mean much to us, so we had to kind of find a way to overcome that. Our objective then is to develop a tool to study subjects' lower limb mechanical performance during 3 different jumps. So this tool we wanted to automatically, first of all, monitor the variables, including muscle asymmetry, in subjects that are undergoing rehab, and also compare the muscle performance of athletes of different sports. So would like a tennis player have a different jump than like a volleyball player or like a track and field athlete? I'm just kind of looking at the different athletes and how that affects their jumps. So the first thing we did was we had the subjects perform 3 jumps on dual force plates. We had them do a counter movement jump, a non-counter movement jump, and a 30-centimeter drop jump. The counter movement jump is kind of what you'd think of if you thought of a squat jump. So that's simply just beginning in standing position, squatting down, and then using that momentum that they gained as they squatted to jump upwards. It's really simple, just like a basic squat jump. In this jump, there's 2 phases. There's an eccentric phase from T1 to T2, and the concentric phase from T2 to T3. So in the eccentric phase, the subject begins in the standing position and descends into their squat position. During this, the quadricep, glute, and hamstring muscle are all lengthened. And in the concentric phase, this is from T2 to T3. This is when they're going from the squatting position, ascending into takeoff. The next jump that we had subjects do was the non-counter movement jump. So this is really similar to the counter movement jump. So they begin in the standing position, they squat down, but instead of jumping up right away, they hold in the squat for 2 seconds. That basically removes any momentum that they gained if they're doing the normal counter movement jump, and they jump up normally as they would in the counter movement jump. This jump now has 3 phases because of that squat position where it's held for 2 seconds. It has the eccentric phase, the transition phase, and the concentric phase. Again, the eccentric phase is the standing position descending into the squat position. The transition phase is simply when they're holding in that squat position for 2 seconds. And then the concentric phase is the squatting position ascending into their takeoff of their jump. The 3rd jump we had subjects do was a 30-centimeter drop jump. For this jump, they began in a standing position on a 30-centimeter platform. They dropped off the platform. They didn't jump off, simply just dropped off, and immediately jumped up afterwards. So again, similar to the counter movement jump, but this time jumping off of that raised platform. And similar to the counter movement jump, again, there's 2 phases, just the eccentric phase and the concentric phase. Eccentric goes from landing and descending into the squat, and the concentric goes from squatting, ascending into the takeoff of the jump. So after this, we then imported all the data, raw data like we showed earlier, into Mathematica, the model we created to be analyzed.
So this is where I take over. So data from the force plate usually comes in an Excel file like this. So there's a lot of data that we do need, and there's a lot of data that we don't need. So we created a code on VBA that actually takes the data that we need only, which is the normal forces, and it gives us a plot for each run. There's 5 of them, so 2 of them are not shown here. And it also shows up here where there are the coordinates that we can directly take from the VBA code and directly copy and paste it to Mathematica. So this saves a lot of time, so we don't have to manually input all of this raw data into Excel and then extract coordinates that we need only and put into Mathematica. So after we added the data into Mathematica, we ran into a bit of problems. So the data here, as you guys can see, is the original raw data is the one in the blue. So there's a little bit of noise in there. So we came up with a solution by adding a Gaussian filter. So the Gaussian filter is applied, and now you guys can see that the data is a bit more smooth now. And if we were not to use a filter at all and take a derivative, these errors would be more amplified. And you can see that there's a lot of noise here in the data, and that's something that we cannot use to analyze our data. But after applying 20-order Gaussian filter, our derivatives now are more smooth, and this is something that we can begin to analyze our data with. Another issue that we ran into is now that we have smooth data, but our data is not continuous. So the raw data are just thousands of points that are plotted next to each other, but there is not continuous, as you guys can see that it's not a continuous curve. So we use the interpolating function in Mathematica, which essentially fits a third-order spline between every single 2 points, and it creates a smooth data now that we can integrate and take the derivatives of in order to analyze and get our variables that we need. So after all of this, we developed a model that's continuous. There's less noise in the data now. So the next point is to automate this process to give us the defined phases that Meredith was talking about. So the first jump that we attempted to automate was the counter movement jump. So we were able to successfully determine T1, T2, and T3. And how do we do this? So first, we define T3 as being the most, we find the most minimum force between 0 and 2 seconds, and we find it to be T3. Next, we define T2 as being the time at the maximum force. And this is just usually done by taking the maximum function in Mathematica. And the next step here is we allow T3 to approach T2 until it reaches a certain threshold force. And we do this by using a while loop in Mathematica. Next stage is to develop a code where it will automatically pick up a point somewhere here, which we define as T1 in our jumps. And how we did this was we took the y-intercept here and the minimum force down here, and we found the slope of that line. And from that slope of the line, we found where the function of our derivative equals to that slope of the line. So this is a good way to automate the process for different types of people. So that's the reason why we use this method here. And that's how we define T1. So from there, we have our eccentric and we have our concentric phases for our counter movement jump. So a non-counter movement jump essentially works the same way. So we use the similar ideas and concepts that we did for the counter movement jump. So again, we use the slope method here to define our T1, which you guys see right here. And then the next step, we define the most minimum time between 0 and 4 seconds. If we find that time, it will be somewhere between these 2 points. And then we define the maximum time at the peak, which is right here. And we allow T4 to approach this time again until it hits a minimum threshold force, and which we define that as T4. And T3, we define similarly using the slope method. So we work backwards actually. So we go from the maximum time at the peak force, and we run a while loop until it reaches a threshold slope, or until our derivative equals to a slope value, and which we define as T3. And from there, we can just take the maximum, the time at the maximum between T3 and T1, and that will give us the time at this peak right here, and which we define as T2. And for the drop jump, it's done similarly. It's the most simpler one out of all the 3 jumps. So we let T1 approach a value again until it reaches a certain threshold value, and then once it hits the threshold value, we get T1. T3 is done similarly in the same way. We allow it to approach T1 until it reaches a threshold force. And then between T1 and T3, we just find the time at the maximum peak, which is T2, and that's the point where there is a phase change. So after we entered all the data and we got the desired time phases, we can now begin to define the variables of interest to us. So what are these variables? So these variables are things like standing mass of the subject. So we found this by just dividing the force due to gravity by their force in the standing position. And this can only be done for the counter movement jump and a non-counter movement jump. As in the 30-centimeter drop jump, the subject is not standing on the force plate. The kinetic impulse we calculated by just taking the integral between the force time curve, and we were able to do this because we had that continuous function. And the peak force we just obtained from each phase of the jump, so they would be the same for the concentric and eccentric because those are the points where there's a phase change. The phase length is what we automated in the last couple of slides, and we're also able to determine the asymmetric index. And sorry about the bit of cutoff here, but we define the asymmetric index as the left impulse minus the right impulse divided by the maximum of the two, either left or right impulse. So after we get all of our data points, we find our variables. The next step was actually to analyze the data and to compare between the subjects and to see if there's any asymmetry. So when we were looking at the studies, we were looking at both intra and inter-subject comparisons. So we looked at the left leg and the right leg. We looked at all the jump phases, so the concentric and eccentric phases, and we also looked at all jump trials. So there was 5 trials per jump. And we looked at all 3 jumps, so the counter movement jump, non-counter movement jump, and the 30-centimeter drop jump. And the t-tests were also used to determine level of significance as well.
So for the results, we had four subjects to work with. However, some subjects didn't do the drop jump because the drop jump is a more intensive jump. And the third subject that didn't do this was actually an ACL injured subject. And you will see that in the next 2 jumps. But for the drop jump, you can see that there's a difference between this curve and then subject 2 and subject 4 curve. And that subject 1 is a more wider peak, subject 2 is a more narrow peak. And there's a lot of variation in the different subjects. So we tried to look at the different variables that we produced for each phase, and we created bar graphs for the averages of each run. So we looked at the kinetic impulse, and we tried to see is there a difference between the 2 limbs, the left and right limb. We did this again for the average peak force. We looked at the average interval in the concentric phase and the eccentric phase. And then we looked at the counter movement jump, which had the 4 subjects. Now subject 3 is ACL injured subject. And again, you can see the different variation between different subjects. Some subjects have a higher max force, some have a lower, some have a more wider peak, greater interval. And again, with the same variables. The difference here is that for subject 3, because they're an ACL injured subject, we had data on multiple days. So we looked at data over 4 months. And you can kind of see that there's some change between them in terms of standard deviation. Standard deviation becomes a bit smaller. And you can see there's consistent maximum peak impulse on the right leg that's greater than the left leg, where the left leg is the injured one. Again, we looked at the average mass and standing position, and the same trend can be seen for subjects 3. Subjects 1, 2, 4 did show a bit of variation, but the variation was different, whereas for subject 2, for example, they had an average mass that was higher for the left leg, but then if we look at peak force or impulse, this wasn't also the same trend. We wouldn't see a dominance in the left leg. So looking at the average interval, and then we looked at the average interval in concentric, eccentric phases, and then the average peak force. They didn't tell us much for the 3 subjects of 1, 2, 4, but subject 3, we saw the same trend of decreasing standard deviation. But looking at these single data runs, there isn't that much to tell. Again, we looked at these kinetic impulse for non-counter movement, for peak force, average mass and standard position, and average interval in both phases. And we created a summary of the different dominance of left, right leg, or whether they were the same dominance. And we tried to see if there's any trend between the healthy subjects or the non-healthy subjects. And it was very difficult to try to create this. because there's no visible trend. Part of this is because we have different subjects from varying backgrounds. And because of this, one person's dominance might be different from another subject's. For example, a rugby player might have really strong both legs, whereas a swimmer might have a preferred side, whether it's for backstroke or side stroke or things like that. However, we did notice one thing for subject 3, the injured subject. One thing was that the right leg had a generally dominant impulse peak force standing mass. However, the phase intervals were longer for the left leg. So 2 questions arise from this. Does the healthier leg compensate for the injured one? And does that create a more dominance for the healthier one? And further, do the injured limbs take longer to stabilize because the phase intervals were longer for the injured limb? And then another question is that we saw that the standard deviations here decrease over time. So does this mean that the subject becomes more controlled as they recover from their injury? Does this mean that there's less variation, there's just more control? So these are all things that we should aim to answer, and but we can only do this if we have more data on injured subjects to see if this is a trend that's reoccurring in different subjects. So looking at the variation too, that could also tell us a lot of things. Due to time constraints, we weren't able to look too much into this, but you can see in subject 1 they have a very wide peak, subject 2 is a more narrow peak, and subject 3 has kind of 2 peaks. So does this mean that subject 3 is less able to adapt to this transition between the 2 phases? Or does it mean something else? What do the 2 peaks mean? And in addition, when we have subject 1 that has a wider peak and subject 2 is a narrow peak, does this mean that subject 2 is more adept and quicker at changing or not? So those are all things that we should look at for different athletes. One challenge we have for the drop jump is that because of this variation, we expected this peak to be prior to the second peak. Because in the drop jump, there's 2 peaks. However, in this case, there's an earlier lower peak. And because of this, our algorithm couldn't detect it properly, and our eccentric phase was longer than our concentric phase. Another challenge we had with the non-countermovement jump is that one subject didn't have a clearly defined eccentric phase, as you can see here, where we expect kind of a sine wave almost, whereas this subject didn't have a clearly defined eccentric phase at all, and our mathematical code couldn't account for this. In addition, some of the data that we received was cut off due to experimental error, so we started recording midway through the jump. So instead of getting the expected curve on the right, we instead got the curve on the left. So we completely missed the eccentric phase, and because of this, our algorithm can account for this. And as a result of that, we could only analyze 4 subjects, and only 1 subject had data for more than 1 date. So this creates a big issue because if we're trying to analyze subjects for only 1 date, we can't account for different variation in days. For example, maybe the subject helped a friend move or something, or they're sore from a game or a practice, so they might have not perform as well as they could. So that's one issue. The other issue is that the data trends caused by difference in athletic backgrounds can't be accounted for, because each subject we looked at had a different background. So that means what might be normal or what asymmetry that subject might have might be normal for them, but it might not be normal for a different subject. So these trends, these differences are not really understood, and they cannot be accounted for currently. So our next steps are to collect more data for both healthy and injured subjects. And in addition, we wish to add and modify our program so we can account for different cases as we saw in the drop jump where we had the 2 peaks. Our tool has the potential to do 2 things. One, to study injured subjects and to monitor their health and see how well they progress. In addition, we can study athletes from different sports and determine if there's any variation between those different sports and whether a single sport has more asymmetry than a different sport. Thank you. Do you guys have any questions?
We have some time for questions.
So you collected a lot of data according to people's jumps. Were there any surprises in the data that you collected, or was it did it conform to what you expected to see?
There was a lot of surprises. A lot of the data didn't really, we initially got one person's jumps, and we modeled all of our models based on that person. However, we receive jumps maybe once every 2 weeks or things like that. But every single person had a different jump curve. So one person might have a really well-defined curve, one person might have a curve that kind of deviates a lot, and that might mean that they're not very, they don't have very well-controlled squats or jumps or anything like that. So that's very telling of how the individual runs. And that creates an issue for us because when we're trying to write a mathematical code that automatically account for this, it's very difficult to predict what we're going to get. So we have to add and adjust with every single subject we get.
Do you have any questions?
Well, that's
Sam?
I have a feeling this question may be a little foolish, but going back to the beginning when we first started talking about the eccentric phase and the concentric phases, what is this eccentricity that you're referring to? What is this eccentricity?
So the definition of those phases came from the previous work that we were looking at. It actually, the eccentric is defined when you're squatting and like some of your muscles are lengthening, some of them are shortening, and the concentrics when the muscles are doing the opposite. So muscles that were lengthening when you're squatting down, then are like contracting when you're squatting or when you're standing up in the concentric. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but there's got to be an eccentricity, something that's like offset or something like that. The word eccentricity, is there a technical definition of that?
We're not sure who to find it, but you're thinking forces and
Yeah,
moments.
yeah.
We're not sure who to find it.
not
We didn't come up with a definition, but it's pretty standard as far as I know for different types of exercises to define what types of muscles you're using based on concentric, eccentric movements. But I'm not sure why.
Yes.
Did you have any code or any instructions for the subject to perform their jumps or just tell them what to do this jump? So what it was in style to do?
So the data was collected by the head strength and conditioning coach at the university. So all the subjects were given the same types of instructions, and they were given the same types of instructions in terms of when they squat down for the non-counter-movement jump, how long do they hold for, things like that. So we tried to keep it controlled, but of course with every single person, if we look at the standard deviations, we can tell that with every single run, each subject performed a little bit differently. So it's hard to recreate the same jump over and over. But as far as controlling it goes pretty controlled.
And could the decrease in the standard deviation happen because they are repeating the same thing again and again, so when they start they might be
They're getting better at
yeah,
performing the
getting
jump.
better at the problem that is the same exercise that you are asking them to do.
That's a possibility. So we have to look at the injured subjects and healthy subjects and see, do we get that same trend for healthy subjects as we do for injured subjects? If that's true, then we can't say that the injured subjects are getting recovering, getting better. But of course, we need more data to do that.
Going back to the guy with the subject with the ACL torn, just a quick question. Was his dominant foot the left foot before he got injured, or like was it his dominant foot the right foot before he got injured? Do you guys know that
That's a
information?
good question. We don't.
From that image?
No, like do you guys know like
Oh.
if he was like left footed and then like he got injured and then his right foot became dominant?
We don't have that.
You guys should get.
Any other questions? Still have some time.
Yeah.
Where did you find these people?
They are actually athletes at the university from different sports. So they all play on different athletic teams.
Future research. So let's say you get the data, let's all of us fold the jump and you get that data from us. What are your plans in terms of the tests that you're going to run to tease out those relationships?
Well, we have to do it for injured and healthy subjects, see what trends we get, and perform the t-tests for those. See, is there a relationship that's independent for the healthy and injured subjects? So for one, it would be whether there's a dominance for healthy limbs, and whether that creates a longer interval for the damaged limb. And then we also see if there's that same recovery trend in terms of standard deviations. I mean, having more data might show us more trends, but these are the only trends that we can currently see and we need to study.
Plus, like, an advantage of obviously having the university, all these teams, is we can start looking at teams specifically. So looking at, like I said, like a track and field team, certain types of athletes, looking versus like a swimming team, seeing how they vary, not just in terms of like injured or uninjured, but the way they actually